everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Betty and this is Betty's Space. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to give you my top 10 tips to get through your exams, and this applies to everyone. Like, I was going to say top 10 tips for neurodivergent people, but I think this applies to a lot of people, but some of them are going to be catered to more people with disabilities and neurodivergencies, because obviously that's what I know, and just some things you can ask for or things you can try and implement to make exams a little bit easier, because I'm someone who has always struggled not really with taking the exam, but with the lead up, the study, the actual exam environment rather than the paper. So yeah, these are some things that I picked up along the way. This idea was originally done, I think, by Zara Beth, who is one of my favourite content creators. So yeah, I thought this was a really cool idea, and I actually learned some things that I thought would be useful for me through her video, so I thought maybe this would help some people if you're new to the world of navigating exams with extra support needs. Number one is an access arrangement. A lot of these are actually access arrangements that I have. So number one is extra time. This is a fairly standard access arrangement, and by that I mean there's quite a lot of people that have this, and this is fairly accessible, I find, without a diagnosis. Obviously I've never had to navigate, very luckily, exam access arrangements without diagnoses, because I've had my autism diagnosis since I was 7, so before I really took any major exams, even like the Kent test, that original one when I was 7 gave me access to an EHCP, which is an educational healthcare plan. I think different countries have different variations, but that is a key document that if you've got diagnosed with almost any condition or have any disabilities, if you can get an educational healthcare plan, it's going to be so helpful. It's like a key to opening a lot of doors in the way of help, support, arrangements. But yeah, so the first one is extra time. I have 15% extra time, but I think you can have 15 or 25. I've never heard of more than 25%. But this is exactly what it sounds like. Whatever the exam is, I get 15% more time than that. So if it's an hour, they work out what 15% of that is and then add it on. I find this helpful for so many things. And people have this access arrangement for a wide variety of different reasons. You can have it because I have it for a broad variety of reasons. For starters, I have anxiety disorder, and that can make me overthink things a lot. So just having the extra time that I'm going to be using to process is really useful. Also, organisational skills. If you need extra time to be able to think about, your pen, your pencil, making sure you've got everything, making sure you're on the right question or you're writing in the right box for things like science, that can be really useful. I also find it super helpful with spelling. Now that I work on a laptop, you're not allowed to have spell check on, or I think you can, but I don't have spell check on. So when I write everything, I know that when I write an average sentence, I'd say if the sentence is 14 words long, there's usually roughly between 3 to 6 words that are spelt wrong. More if it's something like English or history, where I'm using sort of more ambitious vocabulary and it's harder to spell. So I need that extra time to be able to go back through at the end, or question by question, and try and respell or get the words closer to what they are, or get punctuation in. I often don't use punctuation in sentences. All that's taking a lot more time and I'm going to use the word average. By this I mean someone who is neurotypical, isn't struggling with this specific struggle, someone who is what the exams are typically catered towards. I'm going to use the word average, but that's what I mean by that term. Something that's going to not be a problem for the average person, that's going to take me extra time so that it doesn't actually impact my overall exam time, because then it'd be a disadvantage. All of these things I find are people can sometimes view access arrangements as unfair, even people that have them. I know lots of friends, and even I've struggled sometimes to be like, is this unfair? Am I getting too much help? Am I getting these good grades because I've got these things and I shouldn't be? But access arrangements at the end of the day are to create a level playing field so that everyone can take the same exam under the same conditions internally. These aren't, cheating. They're not cheat codes or things that you don't deserve. If you've got an access arrangement can sometimes, unfortunately, be incredibly difficult to get and to get approved and implemented, and they get forgotten. I can't tell you the amount of exams that I've had where they've forgotten to implement one or many of my access arrangements. So if you've managed to get it, know that you deserve it, because you would not be able to get the active arrangement if you didn't have the requirements for it. You just wouldn't be able to go through the process of acquiring it. Second one, rest breaks. Again, rest breaks can be used for so many reasons. People who have medical conditions that need rest breaks, or it's often called stop the clock. They're one and the same. They can sometimes have different limitations. Sometimes stop the clock is what it sounds like. You stop the clock on your exam. So the time when you say, I'd like to stop now, before you, and then until you start up the exam again, that time is deducted from your overall time and added on at the end. Often with stop the clock, I've found that it means you can't leave the room. So you can stop, you can stand up if you're on your own. If you're not, then, you know. But people who are diabetic can use it if they need to have insulin. People who have medical conditions like seizures and things, people with Tourette's. These accommodations can be used for such a wide spectrum. For me, rest breaks are really important for a couple of reasons. They can be good if the exam is incredibly overwhelming, or I've gotten to a point in the exam where I am panicking, I'm stressed, I might be going into a panic attack. Being able to stop, and sometimes I have to have that panic attack, but being able to stop the clock, let it pass through my body, and then start again is super helpful, because otherwise I can spend 10 minutes having a panic attack and just be sat staring at my paper or trying to push through. Those answers aren't going to be as good. If I'm sat there not writing, that's a waste of time. And sometimes knowing the time is wasted is making me more stressed. So if I can stop it, I know that I can take as long as I need to get myself back together. And with rest breaks, generally, depending on the circumstances of where you're sitting, your school, your environment, these are all, you know, specific to that. But generally, you can get up and leave the room. And I think this is really helpful for people with ADHD, who can get up, get a new change of scenery, get different input. You can't talk to people. So again, they make sure that it's not allowing you to cheat. You're not allowed to talk to people when you take your rest breaks. You're not allowed to talk to anyone apart from a member of staff who's with you if you've left the room. You know, if you need to go to the bathroom, it's a bit like if you need to go to the bathroom as well. If you have a medical condition that means you need to go to the bathroom more often, you can use stop the clock rather than it coming out of your exam time. I use rest breaks also. I have specific healthcare anxiety, which doesn't come up in a lot of papers, but for example, my English GCSE language, one of my extracts was an extract from a medical journal. I think it was This Is Going to Hurt. I can't remember the name of the author, but a very famous book. A book actually that my mum loves, but it was a very detailed account of a hospital and an operation, and I found that incredibly triggering, and I had no clue it was going to be in there. So as soon as I opened the paper up and I read this extract, I immediately, and I didn't use rest breaks a lot because I usually get in a flow, especially in my GCSEs, but I immediately asked for a rest break and had to stop just to let myself get over the shock of, oh my god, my worst case scenario has happened, there is something deeply medical in this exam. Okay, take a breath, reset myself, how am I going to cope with this, get over the initial shock of that, and then go back in. And that was so beneficial because it did throw me, but had I not had the chance to let my body process this before starting the exam, that would have thrown me for the whole exam and been really stressful. But they're a great tool of, if you need it, you have it, you know. And sometimes that just knowing that you can stop it is enough that you don't need to, because you don't feel so stressed and confined to, oh my god, I've got an hour and I can't stop, and what if this happens, what if that happens, what if I think that. The ability to know, actually, if that does happen, I'll just ask to stop, take a minute and get back into it. That can be incredibly useful. My third access arrangement is a laptop. This was a revelation. I cannot tell you how much this has changed not only my way of working, but my exams as well. I used to handwrite. The whole of primary, whole of secondary, I handwrote just like everyone else. And it was awful. For starters, my spelling was already awful. And obviously in an exam, I can't have spell check on. But in class, when I'm taking notes and revising, because I now use a laptop. Now I'm in college, I use a laptop all the time. But when I was in years 10 to 11 of secondary, that's when I got my laptop as an arrangement. And I also could have it as my natural way of working, which means how you work in lessons. Now, I didn't use it for maths and I rarely used it for science, but English and history and other subjects, like writing subjects, coursework for my music BTEC, it was incredibly beneficial to have notes that were spelt correctly, because I could use spell check, and also legible. My handwriting, due to both dyslexia and being autistic and having terrible fine motor skills, my handwriting has always been terrible. Ever since I was in primary school and you had pen licenses, I was the last to get one. My writing's always been terrible. I've had teachers not mark work because it's illegible. I've had teachers cross out essays because it's illegible, and that's not something I can help, but they can't read it and I can't make it any better, especially when you're writing under a time pressured time. And also, I used to get terrible pain in my hand. I used to have like calluses on my fingers because I hold a pen strangely. I've been made aware, it didn't feel strange, but I was slow at writing and I was trying to make it legible but quick because of the time. It was so stressful. And the minute someone said, "Do you want a laptop?" which was so hard to get. I find a lot in, especially in mainstream schools, it is very difficult to get a laptop without a dyslexia diagnosis. And I did not have a dyslexia diagnosis at the time, so it was impossible. They were like, "Oh, if you don't have that, then you can't have a laptop." And then when I moved schools and they offered it to me, it was life-changing. The fact that I know my whole exam is legible, my hand isn't in constant pain, I type a lot quicker than I write, it has just been the most useful tool. Also a difficult one to get. It's often one I find gets forgotten. You have to reiterate a lot. And also it's very important that if you have a laptop for your access arrangements, make sure it's your natural way of working. Usually it has to be for them to be able to make it your exam access arrangement, which means using it in class and using it as what you do every day, because your fingers will get quicker, your typing will get quicker, you'll get used to it. But also even the type of laptop. Generally schools have exams laptops that they only use for exams. However, especially when I was actually in my last year of school in year 11, I went into a mock exam. Luckily I had my mocks first, obviously, and I went into a mock exam and there was this tiny little computer which was about half the size of my keyboard, of the computer I was using, which at the time was a school computer. And I did the exam, and then I immediately went to our exams officer, who luckily was a lovely lady who I could go and see face to face. And I said, "Is there any way this cannot be my laptop for my GCSEs? Because the way that it's half the size means that my fingers aren't used to typing. So my fingers had to be crammed together, and because I wasn't used to it, I was making way more typos than normal. So it was taking me much longer to type and to go back and correct, not spelling mistakes. I knew how to spell a lot of these words, but little typos that will get picked up on exam." And in the end, I was incredibly grateful that they managed to secure, I think, 3 or 4 normal sized laptops that they managed to make into exams laptops, which obviously means locking them down, you can't access the internet, you can't have spell check, etc, etc, and made them exams laptops, which I was so grateful for, because if just a laptop is your normal way of working, but the laptop you're doing your exam on is one that you've never seen and never touched before your exam and is significantly different, you know, the screen is different or the keys are different, that's not your normal way of working then. And that was something that I found immediately that I hadn't thought about before it happened. And then I was like, oh, now I need to make sure this is checked. And another bonus actually of having a laptop is with dyslexia is that if you need to, and especially in essay subjects, you can change the page colour on your screen to green. So to reread what you've written, I often find is easier. I don't do this every time, but sometimes I will, and I'll change the page colour to green, and then I'll be able to read back through what I've written much easier. I find it's one of the harder access arrangements to get, but if you can get it, it has been so life-changing for me. And I urge you, if you're struggling with writing, if you're struggling with any of this, speak out, find your Senko, find your head of form, your teacher, you know, whoever you feel safe going to, and say, is it possible we could just have a conversation about arrangements? Is it possible something could be done? Because a lot of the time, if you have, you know, a good Senko or a good head of form teacher, they've seen so many students that there are access arrangements you didn't even know about. So many of these I didn't know would ever be an option. Like having a laptop, I thought there's no way that's going to be allowed. I wouldn't even thought to ask for it until someone offered it to me, and I suddenly realised how much it was going to help. But I would never have thought to ask. So even just saying, can we talk about, these are my struggles, you know, is there anything you can do to help me? And they might be, yeah, we can put this in place or that in place. And you'll be like, wow, I never knew those were even options. So I urge you to go and talk to anyone to see if there's something, because there might well be, you know, you never know. Okay, number 4, a separate room. That is, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. I have a separate room. I used to be in a small room. Usually with exams now, there's the main hall and a small room, which is just usually a room with people for access arrangements. I find often it's everyone with extra time or just everyone with an access arrangement. They put depending on how many of you, there could be 5, there could be 25, but there's not usually more than 30, into a smaller room where you all get extra time, or those that get extra time, they can, you know, they can keep it all together and out of the main hall. I did that for my mocks even in like year 9, my end of year exams in lower secondary, and in my mocks for my GCSEs. However, what we found during my GCSEs was, it was actually discovered in class. In class, I would always talk to myself. Like when they were like, get on with these questions in maths, for example, I would sort of mutter under my breath to myself. And I'd never really picked up on it until my friend who was next to me was like, oh, can you stop talking? I'm really trying to concentrate. And I was like, what? And she was like, you mutter every day under your breath. You talk to yourself. I'm like, right now it's distracting me. And I hadn't really noticed. And then my teacher said, oh, I've noticed you doing that. How come? And I sort of thought on it, and I thought, actually, I think it's because, I don't always do it, but I think it's because when I'm doing a difficult question or I'm in exams, my brain is so full of trying to make sure that, just to keep myself balanced, that I actually don't have room in my brain to like hold the numbers or hold the words. So I speak it out loud to sort of fix the auditory loop. It must be something neurodivergent, but to fix that loop, I have to say it out loud to hear it again. Then I realised that I was doing it in my mocks, and they were like, you can't, obviously, it has to be dead silent. And luckily, because I was at a specialist school where they could accommodate this, they said, should we try putting you in a room on your own so that you can talk? And so I did one mock in a room on my own where it was just me, my laptop, my extra time, and I had one invigilator just sat in the corner. And at first I was like, oh my god, it's just me and her, like, this feels a bit awkward. But luckily the invigilator was a TA who I knew fairly well because it was just a mock exam. And it helped so much. I could talk out loud. I don't talk at full volume often, but I could talk out loud. I could even give, and it sounds so cringy, but I could give sort of positive encouragement to myself verbally, which I found helped so much with my anxiety. Like I could be like, it's okay, we've got this, or take a deep breath, or, you know, something verbal, or okay, take a minute, let's break it down. Things like that verbally. And I found that just speaking them out loud physically grounded me and just made me feel more in control. And so ever since then I've been on a room of my own. And when I moved to sixth form, that was one that was slightly hard. I did say when I went into the meeting, when we discussed access arrangements and EHCPs, I said, look, I appreciate this one might be impossible. And they said, no, we can make it happen, because we do. And I think as well, again, there's hundreds of reasons people have small, like separate rooms, completely separate, because there's always small but separate rooms. They might have Tourette's, they might have seizures, they might have, you know, loads of different medical conditions, even like severe OCD where they need to do certain compulsions. Like, there's so many different reasons why you might need this, but for me personally, it is because I verbalise. That's what they call it, verbalising, but I just talk to myself, and I can't really stop it. Usually now I preface and I talk to the invigilator, because if you haven't invigilated someone who does what I do, which is fairly niche, you might not know. Before we start the exam, I say, can I just let you know I'm in here because I verbalise, because often they don't know why you're in there, they just know they're invigilating a separate room. So I say, I'm in here because I verbalise, and this means that I'm going to talk to myself, and it might sound like I'm asking a question, but actually I'll be asking myself a question. So then I ask their name, which they don't always have, and I say, oh, what's your name? And I say, okay, just so you know, if I need to stop the clock or have a rest break or something happens, you know, if I need you, I'll say your name, so that you know, apart from that, you know, because I've had invigilators who I haven't spoken to, who every time I say something that sounds like I'm talking to them because it's slightly louder or it's a question, they'll sort of flick their head, and you know what I mean, they try not to look at you, but they can't help it, and I find them like twitching at me all the time. So I've said, look, you know, I'm not talking to you unless I say that, just for them and for me, so that I don't feel bad about talking and I don't feel awkward about it, and they know what's going on, because often they don't get told. And so I think it's really important to communicate with your invigilator about what you need and how it's going to go, so that you can feel comfortable and they can feel comfortable and everyone can just know what's going on. 5 is pretty simple. I have an overlay. I got this before my dyslexia diagnosis, when they didn't think I was dyslexic, because my reading age has always been really high, so dyslexia was out the question for a bit, even though now I know and people know that that's a stereotype, that, you know, if you can't read then you must have dyslexia, and if you can read you mustn't have dyslexia. We know that's outdated, but at the time it was sort of dismissed. But they knew that my spelling wasn't great, and when I had to read on plain black and plain white paper, I'd really struggle. So it was with certain types of fonts I was really struggling, and certain colours. So they said, okay, will an overlay help? And I was given a celery green one and now I just make sure to have that in exams. I have been offered to have my exam papers in colour before, but I found that I don't need that. But yeah, I have that for, again, just another just in case measure that can make life a bit easier for me in exams. Number 6 is stimming. As someone who's autistic, I've always stimmed. I have heard of people having fidgets in their exam, like actual fidget toys. I don't have fidget toys. I don't know if I'd be allowed them. I haven't opened up the conversation. I've never found it necessary. But I do fidget in different, like having a ring on my finger is often something I do to spin the ring, or a necklace, or like a tassel of a hoodie, fiddling with that. A big thing that I do and have always done is I call it jigging my knee. But basically I like bounce my leg. And my knee like jiggles up and down, and I have always done this when I'm stressed, excited, scared, nervous, sometimes just normally. It is my biggest stim and I've always done it. But again, something that has really helped being in a separate room is this used to distract people. Like at the corner of that eye, my knee jigging, sometimes it make noise if I had squeaky shoes on, if the floor was squeaky, if it made the desk, I've had it make the whole desk like shake, and if you're on like a row, like the desks can shake. It's just, I've had those people be distracted by it, and obviously I don't want to distract them, but if I don't do it, it feels like it's fizzing in my body. Like I feel like, I always call it like a fizzy feeling, because it feels like my blood is fizzing. Like if you shake in a can of Coke, it feels like I need to let it out, and how I let it out is by jigging my knee. And if I can't do that, and it's so distracting to have that feeling of needing to do it and not being able to do it. So again, that's something that's really helpful with a separate room, is the ability to stim freely. Okay, the rest of these are not arrangements, but things that I've done before and after and around exams to help make them easier. So number 7 is studying. Studying has been a massive point of difficulty, stress, upset over my whole life. I have always found studying near impossible and been so frustrated by that, because I am someone who enjoys school. I always enjoyed lessons, I enjoy learning, I enjoy practice at school, but as soon as I wasn't in the school environment, even if they gave us an hour to revise in lesson, loved that, but revising and studying outside of school was always impossible for me. And I've always found homework very difficult for a similar reason. Less so now that I'm older homework, but when I was younger, I found homework so difficult. When it came to my GCSEs, that was the first big time that studying and revising at home was expected. And you know, there was all these thrown around of 4 hours every night, 2 hours every night, 6 hours a week, 7 hours a day, 3 hours each subject. There were so many numbers being thrown at me, and I was sat there thinking, I can't do 20 minutes. How am I gonna, everyone was saying to get an A star you need to have 6 hours, and I was thinking I can't do 20 minutes. How am I going to pass these exams? My teachers would ask me, are you revising? And I go, Or they'd say, oh, I can tell you've been revising, and I'd be like, well, I absolutely haven't, so I'm glad that I'm slipping under the radar. But the biggest thing for me with revising was learning, and I'm still learning now, to accept that it is not something I find easy, but that I am actually someone who is able to get the grades I need without it, or doing as much as I can. These numbers, like 5 hours a day, are never going to be achievable to me. But I've had to find a few tips and tricks to help. So a couple of things that have helped me is changing location, doing it at the desk, at the dinner table, going out to a coffee shop, going out to a different coffee shop, going to the library, going to my nan's house, going to somewhere different where a change of environment has helped me a lot. Setting smaller achievable goals has been helpful. Rather than revise for an hour, revise for 20 minutes and celebrate that. Revise for 10 minutes and celebrate that. And that's something I found really hard to do, is celebrating wins when social media especially was a big point of contention, because I could see other people doing amazing, this study routine, that study routine, get up at 6 a.m, study until 1 in the morning, or I'd have friends who were like, I pulled an all-nighter, or I've studied 7 hours this week, and it all felt so suffocating, especially in secondary. But so celebrating those small wins was something that was really important. I have learnt, for me, changes are necessary, and I mean that in the way I study. I used to find that I would try one program, like, there's so many I've tried, I can't even remember the names of them, but sort of different AI learning platforms, where you can put your notes in, or BBC Bite Size, or the blurt method where you put it all on a page, or revision cards, or all the different methods. And I tried them, and sometimes, most times, if I was lucky, for one day they'd work. I'd be like, Mum, I've studied for an hour and a half today, and I've used this program, and this program's great, and it makes it easy, and it makes this, and it makes it a game, or it makes it a podcast or whatever, and it is working great. But then if I tried to do the same thing again 3 days later, it wouldn't work. I wouldn't be able to focus. I would have big panic attacks or meltdowns, or I wouldn't be able to do it. I would get so upset that it didn't work. So I found that changing constantly is needed. Trying a new program or a new way, which in the end gets impossible because you do run out of them, but so accepting that as well has been really difficult. And I think for me, taking the pressure of studying is something I'm still really working on, because I can build up the need to do it and how important it is, and oh my god, it's gonna be hard in my head, to the point where I even think about the subject, I launch myself into a panic attack, because I used to get into a terrible habit of not studying but always thinking about studying or revising. So I'd go the whole day, do no revision, but have always been thinking about that I'm not doing it. So I wouldn't enjoy anything. The breaks that I was having, or the rest days or whatever, they wouldn't be joyful, because I'd be at the movies thinking about it. I'd be out with my family thinking about it. And all I was doing was thinking about that I wasn't revising and that I should be. And then I'd get home and be paralysed by this, that I would end up not revising again. And so the whole thing, so I think as well, trying to take the pressure off. Trying to say, if I get nothing done this week, that's okay. It will be okay. It's not the end of the world. All those phrases. But I would just say with studying, you have to find what works for you and try not to listen to the pressure, because I know there's so much noise around making sure that you must revise, you must study, that's the only way we're going to get through. It's not. I did probably maybe overall 5-6 hours of revision for my GCSEs across all my subjects the whole time, and I did fine. I passed everything. I got 7s, I got 6s, I got the grades that I wanted. It was okay. So I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but I'm just saying that you don't need to, if you're not being able to revise and it's causing you detriment to your mental health, it's going to be okay. You will get through these exams. You'll find things that work for you, and the thing is, they might work for you one day and then never again, and that's okay, because that day was a win. That's something I think is, well, people say, oh, find what works for you. What works for me changes constantly. But that's okay. You have to learn that accepting that is what works for you, you know? Number 8 is about post-exam. So this is once you've done your exam. Now, everyone finds this time different. I have a good friend of mine who finishes her exam and she can remember every single question, and she can remember it for months. I cannot remember a single question when I finish my exam. I walk out that room and I can't tell you any of the questions or any of my answers, but that's okay. And I think people say it, and it's much harder to do in practice, but when you finish an exam, the best thing you can do is forget you ever took it. Just put it to the back of your mind, because usually, especially for GCSEs, your results are ages away. You've got to wait months. So just forgetting everything. Don't go home and research the question that you didn't know the answer to. Don't, go home and stress and try and rewrite out your answers and then get someone to mark them. Just forget you ever did it and move on. Celebrate if you need to celebrate. Sometimes celebrating is not possible, you don't feel in the mood to celebrate. You just want to go home and watch a TV show. And also I think when you're in the midst of a run of exams, whether that's A-levels or GCSEs, and you're doing them back to back, you've got 3 in a week or 1 every week, going home and immediately revising for the next exam is not always the most helpful thing to do, especially if previously you struggle with revising. Go home and watch your favourite TV show. You can give yourself a little reward. I find that giving yourself a dopamine boost, both this works in revising as well as another revising technique I used to do, which was giving myself a reward of dopamine, whether that's a bit of chocolate, a bit of food, an episode of my favourite TV show after every, and make it small, after every paragraph, after every piece, after every 2 pieces, after every hour, however you want to split it up, give yourself that dopamine, because it will help your brain some days. After an exam, that's a great thing to do, is give yourself a little treat. Maybe have your favourite chocolate bar and have that in your bag, and when you finish the exam, you can have your favourite chocolate bar, or anything that brings you joy, a good book, a new book to start, the next chapter of your book, anything like that. Just give yourself a reward for getting through it, even if you think it went terribly, because you've done it, and you should be proud of yourself for doing that. And if you didn't do it, if you walked out halfway through and you couldn't complete it, you're proud of yourself for attempting it. To take it back to whatever level you need to take it to. And finally, number 10, I've sort of touched on this, but just remember that you're not alone. I think exams have so much stigma around them. On social media, on movies, on TV shows, in schools, by teachers, by your friends, your peers. There's so much stress of revising as much as possible, or people that don't care, or they're going to be the end of your life. No, they're not the end of your life. Look at this person, they got bad grades and look where they are. Look at this person, they got great grades, look where they are. There's all of this. You don't know what's going on for other people. You don't know how much people are struggling with revising, and actually opening up about it, which can be incredibly difficult and impossible at the time, but opening up later on can give you such an insight. I've got so many people that I've post GCSE opened up about how much I was struggling with revising and how their revision schedule made me feel inferior, and that's not their fault, but how much I thought about them. Like I used to sit at night and go, oh, I know they're revising and they've showed me their schedule, oh, this person showed me that, and oh, they're all revising right now. And they've actually come back to me and gone, you know, I was struggling too, or I was revising but it was an escape from this, or I was struggling with revising, it was so difficult. You know, so many things that I had no clue they were going through, because at the time we were all so focused on the exam and on ourselves. But know that you're not alone, and go and find, if you're on social media, YouTube, Instagram, go and find content creators that make you feel supported. If their 5 a.m. routine of waking up and doing 7 paragraphs and 4 hours of revision doesn't make you feel good, don't watch it. Go and find creators like Zara, find people that you relate to. If you've got a condition or a disability or you're neurodivergent, go and find those creators, because they will have tips, they will have, you know, pieces of content. Ones that I find really amazing to watch is just them talking about their experience, because you can relate to it, and it's not this perfect day. And I find really difficult. I'm so proud, and it's so amazing of people that get all 9s. Like, that is an incredible achievement, I don't doubt that. But I personally cannot watch videos that are, I got all 9s in my GCSEs, I got all A stars in my A levels, this is my revision target. I can't watch them because they make me feel so inferior and stressed and panicked. So I don't consume that, because I know how it affects me. And if that makes you feel motivated, amazing, go and watch 17 of them. But watch what's right for you, because I wish I had watched more people who not were talking about failing their GCSEs, because that wasn't what was going to make me feel better, but just about how doing your best is okay and how it turned out for them, because that really comforts me. So find what you need, give yourself what you need if you can, try and support yourself, reach out for support, and know that you're not alone in this, because they will be over. And you know, everyone's done their exams or hasn't. Everyone's got an exam story. Every single person you talk to has got a story about an exam they've sat, whether it's for school or for work or a driving test, or they couldn't sit them for some reason, or they sat them. Like, everyone's got a story around it. So if that will help you, go and find them and ask them, and just know that you're not alone with this. Thank you for watching. I will be back soon, and I hope you enjoyed this video.